missing.
Listen, David, and Chris Reed.
Chris Reed and who?
And David.
And David. Yeah. We do have a quorum. We want to start everybody.
We got a few minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the ad hoc committee, September 24th at 3 p.m. Would you please join me in a moment of silence and pledge allegiance? Thank you, and the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, for the next agenda item, we have public comments on anything that's not on the agenda. Is there anything, citizens' comments other than that? Hearing none. I'm going to make just one comment before we move on to the next agenda item, because I just want to make sure we understand the part of the ad hoc committee here. As this ad hoc committee was put together on the recommendation of the council, and the committee will make recommendations on lagoon-friendly landscaping, sustainability, architectural design, access management, and provide recommendations to the staff. Just want to put this out there so we kind of keep in context the scope of what this committee is actually for. Basically, we're talking about majority of the outside of the facility, not everything that's on the inside of the facility. So I just want to make sure we try to stay within that scope. So moving on to agenda item number 4, approval of the architectural fire station public works building. Going to have the presentation.
Architect has renderings for you all. I do want to apologize for rescheduling last Tuesday's meeting. We had more comments back from staff on the internal makings of the meeting, and so we thought it was best to make sure that we got that all incorporated into the design before Greg came up with these renderings for your consideration. So just want to apologize for that delay.
Not working.
It's off and on, and when it comes back on, it's like...
Very loud.
Yeah.
Hi there. Glad to be back. So this is the what you see in front of you is an exterior view of the building from the front, and you can see the roof. We can see kind of a bird's eye view of the building here, and this is following the last meeting with direction on the style of the building and taking into account the residential character of the neighborhood. And see, the other thing is that we've had some other meetings another meeting on the interior layout of the building. So this very closely resembles those interior volumes, those occupied space of the building. So let's see. As you all know, the front elevation here, this is the south side of the building. This is the side where we can really control the daylighting of the building with some sunshades. In terms of the roofing, we've got that south-facing roof. That's about 4,800 square feet. We could do about a 70 kW solar system, photovoltaic system on that roof. Everything south on the south side of that ridge. The mechanical equipment is on the east end of the building. No windows on that east side, but all that mechanical equipment is elevated and has a protective wall around, parapet around that equipment. So it would also be ideally where we locate the generator. The electrical room would also be on the second floor. So this building could be very functional through flood. And let's see, you can see in the lower right here that we show the shading in the summer and the winter. And the site layout in the middle, the center image there, you can kind of see where the parking is in relation to the building and the street. Any questions?
One question. When the building is completed and occupied, what would be the estimated electric use?
It's unknown at this time. We will get into that point where we'll know what the total capacity and total usage could be or modeled at, but I couldn't tell you whether it's 70 kilowatt system or 350 kilowatt hours a day is enough to run the building. I would venture to say that it would be.
Alan, do you recall how much solar is on top of this building? Okay. So I thought this building had something closer to 80 or 90, but anyway, okay. I guess that's to come up in the future then. And the tower, what's the chances that could be training facility for the firefighters?
So it's intended to be a training facility for the firefighters, but in terms of there would be an access to the roof of that tower and a parapet to climb over to rappel points. And, so it would be certainly be used for that. It's also the stairwell for the,
Yeah.
The stair exit. Yeah.
Sir, is this the design that your firm is recommending?
Yes.
Okay. And it's based on input from?
So we've had several programming meetings and design meetings with staff and with the chief and with the director of public works and their staff and the subcommittee. So the way that we start is identifying all the goals for the project and all of the functions that have to go into the building, that develop a program from there, develop the list of spaces that are required to satisfy that program. And then we figure out the adjacencies of those spaces, whether or not a one-story building or a two-story building makes sense, the orientation of that building on the site. So those things have kind of have been part of the process. And at this point, what we had tried to do was get an understanding of the exterior architecture of the building and whether or not, for example, last time we brought some images of modern buildings, some that are more traditional buildings, and there were some images that were put forth. In fact, I have them here that were kind of, this is what we would like. We would like you to sort of match. And so that's what we've come back now with images that of the actual mass of the building, that sort of these were the images that were provided at the last ad hoc meeting.
And so this is addressing the third prong of our objectives, the architectural design,
Yes.
but not the other items.
Correct. Yes.
I think we asked that question last time, and it's probably applicable to a couple of different places. Did we check with Cocoa Beach to see what lessons they learned? They just did a new fire station and everything.
Yes, the fire department and myself and Courtney did actually tour the Cocoa Beach Fire Department, and the fire department put together a list for Greg on things that lessons learned from their new building. And so Greg's incorporating that into his design internally, lessons learned, basically drains, square footage of rooms, types of kitchens, so.
You know, sometimes what you do inside reflects on what they have to do outside, that's what I was bringing it up.
Most of the.
But
most
that's
of the
okay.
comments- yes.
That's you-
Yeah, most of the comments were internal,
Yeah.
up to the building.
The-
And that helped us get this design so that we knew that the square footage wasn't
Okay.
going to change. And that was why we had to, move the meeting a week.
That's good, thank you.
Okay.
Mike?
Well, my knee-jerk reaction is I like it. I like the coastal charm that it has. The tower on the left side, where the 55 is, absent of windows, what's going to be inside of that?
Just a staircase that is, it's basically 4 runs of stairs to get up to the second level. So
Okay.
it's not a switchback stair, it's more of a square kind of plan.
Oh, okay. The list of sustainable elements that we discussed last time, you mentioned a generator, and it looks like you have utilities on the east side, which is wonderful. We did talk about fuel tanks at one time, or accommodating future fuel tanks that were there. We also talked about a water source. If we were to lose potable water, would we want a water source like a well or something? Tanks are a well. I assume a well is more sustainable. We can flush toilets. We can do utilities with it. I don't know if you can put it in a fire truck or not. You probably don't want to, but you could. Would this plan be accommodating to those aspects?
I think there's plenty of room for a well, and we can find a place on the site for that. For a cistern, depending on the outage, I was in Alaska with my family, and they have a 2,500 gallon cistern, and we went through it in about 3 days.
Yeah.
And so with 15 people in the building, it would have to be a really, really big cistern, I would think. So in terms of normal use, if everybody was kind of cutting back to a outage type of use, and maybe something like that could last longer than that. But a 2,500 gallon cistern's not that big, maybe an 8-foot diameter, 8 feet tall. And we could try to find a place for something like that.
How difficult is it to maintain drinking water in a cistern?
It's pretty simple.
Is it?
Sir, can you speak up, please?
It's pretty simple.
Okay. So there's a difference between potable water and non-potable water, and I guess I'm approaching this from the standpoint of when we lose water, we want to flush toilets. We need to wash stuff off, especially if it's in this capacity. So a well might be more appropriate, but then we need to sit back and wonder what we should do for sustainability for drinking water. So those aspects. We just discussed them last time, during last meeting. I just made a note of all those little sustainable things that we put in there. They were discussing fuel tanks on where they're going to wind up in the city. I guess it was on specific where they're going to wind up. But we did talk about a plan that would maybe accommodate that somewhere in the site.
Yeah, and so we do have a yard that's at the northeast corner, designated at the northeast corner of the site.
Okay.
And we can address some of the site elements. We do have a gentleman from the civil engineer's office here. And so we can address some of those site elements, but the fuel tanks would be some distance away from the building toward the back of the site.
Okay. The one thing I noticed I was looking at here, and I compare it to the current geometry we have of the current station, is when people show up and they want first aid. It seems like it would be a pretty good walk for them in this current configuration. Perhaps something we want to address at some point, or look for options of somebody coming in.
I'm sure you could probably, even where you have that one handicap spot, which is right next to that tower, you could probably designate a spot as, would say non-emergency, you know what I mean? Patient, something like that. That way you would have a parking spot for in case somebody needs to come in for a brief visit, a timed parking slot or something like that, where they could go and come right on in.
You think there might be, just as an option, I know we have a dividing line there for good reasons. Looks like Public Works is on one side and the fire is on the other side. If we actually had a cut through right there, it can serve a variety of purposes, but it could also allow a staging place for somebody came up in an emergency. They can pull in that cut through there and be really close to the front door.
I mean, I'm sure you could do that. I always figure if someone pulls up in front of the fire station, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but I've seen people pull up in front of the main doors, in front of the fire trucks. If they got to stop, you know, because they're having heart issues or breathing issues, or they may just pull in the parking lot. You know, standard practice for us is, you know what, in the case of emergency, you leave your keys in your car and you go take care of your emergency. If for some reason, fire department, somebody needs to move the vehicle, they can go get in the car and.
So there's workarounds. We just have to figure if there's a better way of doing it.
I would just get to the point that, right, unless we're really going to have that many people showing up every day,
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to designate a specific spot. And the other hand is, I'm not sure the public's going to say, where's that spot for me to park because I'm having a heart problem right now, as opposed to, in my eyes, if I got a medical issue, I'm just going to pull up in front of the fire station as anywhere I can and hopefully go find help as quickly as possible. And I don't know, I try to do that if I go to Holmes Regional. I'm not really caring where I park. I just pull up somewhere and go get medical help and not really worry about a designated parking spot, so to speak.
We discussed a variety of materials. Are you at the point in the design where you're kind of figuring out what materials you're going to?
So that's what I would like to do at the next meeting,
Okay.
is review materials and colors. And at that point, we'll be pretty well along through. But I will say that as we look at the form of this building, it's more likely that this would be a concrete masonry building than it would be a tilt wall building. But we do know that it's ultimately going to be concrete with some level of cladding on that concrete.
Can you mix those materials to make it more hardened? On certain walls, would you use tilt wall and then do?
You could. It wouldn't be as cost effective because those are two different trades, really, two different subcontractors that we.
So when you bring these options to us, I don't know if I'm stepping outside of our four codes or not, but you know, we were really wanting to make sure it was as hardened as practical.
Yeah, I think the bottom line too is we got to keep in mind that
Well, sustainability.
there is a cost, a total cost that is set aside for the facility.
He'll tell us those costs.
So, I mean, we have to stay, I will say, stay within that bubble. You know, we can have a lot of wants and needs and discussions, but ultimately, you know, I'd say we want the most that we can get that stays within that budget. And from that point of view, even if it comes to tilt wall or concrete block, you know, if we could afford it, then we should go with the best option available. But again, we don't want to have the most expensive wall at the expense of some of the other materials, right? We need to get best value that fits within the budget of there. I think the main idea is, and kind of going back to what you said is, you know, we threw out some ideas of the architectural design. What did we want to look at it? I think some of the things we offered were we're looking for a beachside, beach type area design to it. When someone actually asked me, well, you know, what are you talking about beachside? I said, well, we're talking about something we find in Cape Cod, something we find in Kansas, something we find in Texas, or something we find in Florida. I mean, that's architectural design we were looking for. What is it that we want? And I think you announced that we were trying to find something that fit Satellite Beach and our residents and our way of life and how we have things. So that was kind of where we were going. So ultimately, I just want to make sure that the design that he has brought forward, if we feel that meets what we were looking for. I mean, from that, has anybody got any questions on that, on at least that part of it? From the architectural point of view, has anybody got any comments or questions
Well,
from that point of view?
We discussed folks just showing up. The fire department does have I'll call it a program where people come in and get their heart checked on a periodic basis, sometimes resulting in emergency transport, sometimes not, most of the time not. So I guess the question of David would be, is that a once-a-day thing, a 3 times a day thing, once a week thing? Or you'd say, we'll have a week where we have 10 of them and then a week with nothing? I don't know. And then the question is that going to be on the first floor, or is somebody going to have to go upstairs to do it? And has this even been thought about yet?
Yes, it's been thought about. The path from getting the gurney into the ambulance has been thought about, and where the ambulance would pull up. The transport would pull up. It has been thought about. Basically, the lobby is a corridor that goes all the way through the building. At the back of the building is you pass through this bottom image right here.
Okay.
It's a little hard to see, but at the center of the back of the building is the stairwell, and that door would be a 4-foot wide door, and it's really the perfect place for the ambulance to pull up right there. And there is a treatment room on that first floor right behind the lobby.
So that's where the folks would go when they were getting their heart monitored. So, okay, so that, that detail is taken care of. Okay, that's, other than that,
May I also have any
I'm content
questions
with it.
about the architectural design of what you're seeing in front of you? I mean, everybody tend to agree with that part of it?
I guess I'd have one question, and it's kind of off the wall. I think I know the answer. You've got a peaked ridge roof here. What would happen if you did like a shed roof or something where you've essentially doubled the available solar exposure? And I'm not saying that's a requirement at any means, but, or if you did a, what do you call it when you got 2 roofs, almost like a factory, you know, like this with clear story? Right.
Sawtooth roof. So then we had to get into some drainage issues on a sawtooth roof, but a lot of these photovoltaic panels can mount on on stanchions that can be adjusted.
Yeah.
Can be tilted. And so on that northern side of the roof, it wouldn't be, because this is only a 1-on-12 pitch, whereas most houses are like a 4-on-12 or 5-on-12 roof pitch. So this upper roof area is only a 1-on-12, so making that adjustment, or even just laying those northern panels flat, you're still getting quite a bit of exposure. But if you raise the north edge of that panel, you could very easily do that. I would only say that just to really keep that height of that rear wall down, rather than raising it up another 4 feet on that north side of the building.
The question, what's the difference that is being depicted between the summer photo and the winter?
So that, on the bottom right-hand corner, you see 2 images there of the front of the building. That's the south side of the building. It's going to get the most sunlight, and it's where the most glass is also on the building. And so we really want to control the direct sunlight on that glass. And so you can see we've added some overhangs to the exterior wall there, and it just shows how we've kind of planned those to allow daylight to penetrate into the building during the winter months, and really block out all of that direct sunlight during the summer.
I think that's what they're saying, with that overhang makes that shady in the summer.
Okay.
But in the winter, it'll allow the sunlight to come in from that, which obviously would help cooling and other issues for the building if you're shading some of that.
The utility that you have on the east side, can you describe a little bit more of what we're looking at? Looks like 3 boxes sitting on something.
Sure. So we haven't designed the HVAC system for the building yet, but it's entirely likely that it will be a DX, direct expansion type building, which has indoor units and outdoor units similar to your house. And on that roof, there would be one of those units for each zone that we have on the second floor of the building and the lobby of the first floor. And so right now we're only showing 2, but that area is a large flat area for us to put what we need in that location. The third box, the longer box, is that I haven't shown it would be a diesel generator.
Is there any advantage or is there a possibility of taking the roof line that you have right next to it and extending it over to protect that equipment?
Yes, you could do that, and
Okay.
it's a cost item.
Okay. I'm looking at it for a sustainable element and it rotting in the sun.
The other thing they need to worry about with the roof is have big overhangs, you can get lift during a storm, so
Yes.
you got that to worry about
Yeah.
too.
Anybody else have any?
Do we have Chris?
We have Chris?
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Hi, very good.
Oh, glad you're here. Welcome.
That's it.
Sincerely apologize for being late. I finished with the kids at 3:30, so I rushed over as quickly as possible. So.
No problem.
Glad you're here.
That's what they're proposing for the.
Yeah, for the most part, that picture you got in there is just what we've been talking about. That is the architectural design of kind of the way we expect it to, what they're proposing, expect that would look like, to go over that.
Is that area just left of the utility building, I guess, with the garage door looks like it's closed? Is that actually what is that?
So Public Works has 4 bays that pass all the way through the building, and because their vehicles aren't so long, they'll park tandem, and they'll have some lifts at the back of the first 2 bays. But one of their bays requires a taller door than the others, and rather than let that throw the architecture off a little bit, we didn't need that second floor space to build out that second floor space. So it made sense to allow that roof pitch to come down. And that steeper roof pitch really does help with the residential character of the building.
So it's a maintenance, is
It's
it
maintenance.
maintenance bay?
I mean, it's
Okay, thank you.
Any other further questions?
Looking for a motion?
So I assume we'll get a motion.
Public comment first?
I heard that. Do I have any public comment on this agenda item?
Dominic Montanaro, President. You know, we have a contract now with ABM that's doing all of our,
Oh, ABM.
yeah,
The other
that's looking at all of our air conditioning units on all our buildings and all of our buildings in general. And I'm looking at this, and one of the things that I brought up at our council meeting was, you know, we have air conditioning units that are sitting on top of our buildings that are prone to more salt than they probably should be. And I'm looking at this building, and we've got air conditioning units and generators sitting on the east side of this building where they're going to get the most amount of salt. That makes no sense at all to me when we look at this. I mean, this is a beautiful design, but why can't we move this stuff to the west side of the building? Because ultimately, we're going to be looking at these costs down the road to replace all of these things that are sitting on the east side of the building. And I, for one, don't want to sit up there and have to make the decisions because I don't like the way this is looking. This is ultimately shortening the life of the products that are on this side of the roof. If this building was reversed in such a way and the equipment was on the west side of the building and the building helped protect it from the salt air that's coming off of the ocean, I think we would probably get more longevity out of these units.
In the interest of protecting the contractor, it was this committee that pretty strongly suggested it be on the east side because there's no windows or anything and it protects the occupied part of the building. You do have a valid point, and again, the suggestion of a roof, or there may be other ways to deal with it, I don't know.
As I was drawing this, I was thinking about that point, and so we did raise that parapet so that the top of the parapet is higher than all of the, but salt will settle as well, so it's a good point.
But you could, I presume, put a little roof over. In other words, you've got a unit that usually brings it in at the bottom, blows out the top, and just put not to obstruct the flow.
So reversing, mirroring the whole plan is less desirable because of the turn-in for the trucks, right? If you were to flip that, the trucks passing through the building would have to come in along that east side and make a pretty sharp U-turn into the building. So I wouldn't recommend that as a solution, flipping the whole building, but looking at ways to get the equipment to the other side, certainly.
Is there enough room, and I'm, again, thinking outside the box, in the, what I'll call the utility structure that's on the east side? If you had a portion of that that was basically well vented and you put your equipment, your exposed condensers and everything in there, is that even reasonable? Or I'm not saying yes or no, I'm just saying.
I think programmatically, we would need to extend the building out a little bit further on that west side. To do that. It was, I guess, during our program and our design meetings, it was deemed more important to elevate the equipment above the floodplain.
So from a long-term cost perspective or return on an investment, obviously I know they make air conditioning equipment, stuff like that, more sustainable with salt air. I mean, I know we use them at the Cape all the time because we've got them in every building out there. Carrier and other contractors actually make a more, what do you want to say, salt-resistant, salt-type thing in there. But to that point, I mean, making a change to the building design expense-wise in comparison to replacing the equipment after 20 years or 10 years or whatever that takes, is there a cost benefit, or does one thing outweigh the other? Or, I mean, obviously you would know more because of the cost of the facility. So I don't know, is there a better way to do that that's more cost effective to reach that?
It's not coming to me right now in the moment.
Okay.
But I would look back, I would like to go back and see if we can come up with a better solution than having them exposed in salt air.
Just, when I brought this up at a meeting, they can be hung off the side of the building, because they're doing that in the keys, all over the keys now, where there's a cantilevered area that comes off the side of the building on the west side, and all of it sits there. So it doesn't even have to be on the roof. It could be just hanging off the side of the building, but it's protected over there.
I would only say, obviously, since we put in consideration that's on that side of the building, obviously if you move it to the west side of the building, I'm sure that's going to change HVAC designs and everything else, how you route things in the building, or is it not that difficult to do that?
We're talking about air conditioning, which is on the roof.
Right.
And that's where what Dominic was saying. In other words, again, just on the fly. So on the west side of the building, you had basically the fundamentals of a porch, which would be a ledge that went out for 8-10 feet or something. It could be made architecturally so it kind of looks like a porch, or it could just be there and the equipment is one story up, protected. It's on a roof, but it's not really a roof. It's a balcony is what it is. So, I think there's a bunch of things. If somebody stirs their head a little bit, probably somebody will come up with some ideas to address the issue, and if not. But anyway.
Chris?
Could we possibly explore best practices for maintaining these units? I know you said you had some experience in the Cape with the different materials that they use. Maybe that's something we can look into as far as
Well, I think that kind of goes back to, like you said, you probably need to go back and just, again, in the interest of, again, the whole building and design, obviously, if it's going to cost $2 million to move everything from one end of the building, and we're only holding $6 million for an entire building, and we're talking about a $10,000 unit, then the cost may not be worth the effort. However, it should be looked at and see, is that a possibility? Again, I think we said this before, we have a budget for this entire building. So we have a budget that we need to live within. And obviously, adding, changing one thing, especially if it costs more, is going to mean we're going to take away something else. And I'm sure there's a long list of all the great things we'd like to have in there. So I go back to, we want to make sure there's a return on investment, or it's an easy swap, or it's, it makes sense to do that. And maybe that is an answer. Maybe we can just move some of the HVAC stuff to, or some of those items that are going to get hit by the salt air, move it to the west side without changing the whole building itself, and doing that.
If it'll help, I'll move that we accept the conceptual plan as is, with freedom to adjust some things that we've talked about, like where HVAC goes and that kind of stuff. But in general, I haven't heard anybody complaining about the look or the
Overall concept.
feasibility, the concept of what we have. So that we recommend it.
We've got two department heads here, they're going to be the tenants of the building. Haven't heard from them yet.
Well, I've made a motion, now they can make comments on the motion, how's that? And then somebody can choose whether they want to second it, how's that?
Need a clarification on your motion.
Okay.
You said, the ability to make changes on some of the things. That's kind of vague. What do you do?
I'm talking about
All of
things,
the things.
well, we talked about different ways that we might remove the stuff on the roof,
Yeah.
the things. If they had to, let's say, like the idea I had, to put a balcony on the west side, so we could put them in the air but protected. That's a minor change, it's not going to ruin the look, I don't think, or anything. So that's what I was talking about. It's not, putting a flat roof versus a peaked roof.
So it's just that one change, is that what you're talking about?
What we're asking them to do is best protect the equipment, whether it's moving it or putting another roof on top of it, something to do better than just sitting in the sun.
Yeah.
And I think that's the freedom we want to have. With the concept is solid, but we need to we want to protect the equipment as much as practical.
And we're giving them the freedom to figure out how to
To
do
come up with
that.
those options for us.
Is that your motion?
Yeah,
Second.
So I have a motion and a second.
and I want to hear from you.
And before we go to vote on that, we had a couple people ask if we could get some input from department heads. Can we do that? Have somebody certainly speak up on that?
Alan's driving the bus right now.
Well, we want to hear from both. I mean, this is your,
The
your
one thing we're
building.
talking about is we're hearing about equipment sitting on a roof that's going to be the refrigeration equipment, that's going to be that refrigeration equipment sitting on the side of the building. And then, and to his point, can we look at other ways of cooling the building? In essence, can we look at mini splits? And then we have a smaller component that's changed out easier as it fails. So it sounds like to me we're looking at one style of refrigeration equipment, the type that we have in our house, where we have a condenser, we have a compressor outside and a condenser with an air handler inside. I don't know what the costs are of the mini splits. I don't know how they affect things, but that would be my point. And I think Alan could speak to the maintenance or the concepts of that. I don't know whether he has anything he wants to add, but.
And I personally fit that within what we just discussed, that how do you solve the problem of stuff sitting on the roof?
Right.
And if it's mini splits, that's fine. If it's air to water, that's fine.
I don't care. As long as the
I'm not
building's
talking
cold,
technology.
whatever y'all decide, as long as the building's cold, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So there's some key aspects to this building. Chief?
Yes.
There's some key aspects to this building that seem to be satisfying certain criteria for the fire department? I mean, are there, we want to make sure we're not overlooking anything. This is your chance to shine.
Mr.
'Cause
Clark, can I invite you to join us since this is your building as well?
we go further down this path.
It's done.
I guess what we're saying is, if there's anything that gives you question, we really want to hear it.
And the idea of the architectural concept,
Yes.
the building envelope.
The envelope.
I'm not concerned about what your office looks like inside or anybody else's inside looks. What I'm talking about is the architectural design of the building. Is it going to meet your needs, your wishes, what you think you could get?
From the visions that he's presenting and from what I'm seeing from the outside, I don't see what we're looking at right now is not going to be able to meet our needs. From what he's presenting, from the architectural design of the structure.
Did you say is or is not?
Is.
Is going to
His.
be.
Mr. Sarks, what he's presented, I don't see it as not being able to meet the department's needs.
You're doing a double negative. So you're saying it wouldn't.
Say yes and move on.
I'm good, life's good, let's go with it. All those in favor?
Alan?
While Alan is on his way up here, I'm struggling to hear, and words that I used to hear when I was in the Army come to mind. They don't come to mind that often, but it starts with sound off, and you probably know the rest of it.
Yes, ma'am. I will try to sound off as best I can. From an architectural and design standpoint, I think it's fine. Greg and I will talk about some other issues that I'm having right now, looking at what was laid out last week and then what I'm looking at here. So those are just questions that I have. So there's nothing wrong with the design. I think it looks good. I think it, in the future, that I think there's plenty of roof space for solar, if that's the way we want to go. And my question is going to be, as far as the site itself, is going to be parking. We are going to struggle with parking. When you have staff for the fire department, when you have staff, administrative staff, you have the public works staff, we struggle now with the parking space that we have in between the police department and, where we park. So parking for the employees is going to be a struggle. Besides the fact that there is no way that all of our vehicles are going to fit inside the building, so we have to have more space to park our vehicles and equipment outside. So that's something that I'm very concerned about, and it needs to be taken into consideration. I agree with David when it comes to the air conditioner aspect. The air conditioners, we can look at a mix and match of different units, because, I know Steve was saying that up at the Cape, they use different materials on things, but in my experience, you could build them out of stainless steel. The outside is fine. The inside is what you have to worry about. So when you lose compressors, when you lose condensers and things like that on the inside of the component, that's where the issue is. It's not the issue the outside. You could, so that to me is more of a problem area than just, what material it's made out of. Like you said, the mini split is a great idea and it would work in some applications. Other applications, probably not. The generator, I didn't know we could put the generator on top, but, that's a possibility. Most generators are encased now, so you can, like a pump, the outside pumps, when you put pumps outside, so they're quieter, they're encased. So if that's a possibility, that might very well work on a rooftop. So, those are things to at least consider, look at. But I think my biggest issue is the parking right now. And then the other questions I have, I'll take up with Greg at a later time. Anybody have anything else for me?
Thanks, Alan.
I've got two simple questions, or just one actually. On top of the tower where the 55 is that going to be a lookout area? Will people be able to stand on top of that?
Not the public, but the staff
So you'll have access to,
would have access.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, because you can see over houses from that. Overall, I like the design of it. It does look kind of like our neighborhood, the way the houses do in our neighborhood. So I'm glad that you guys have chosen this one. That's it. That's all I'd say.
So I would just ask, the parking spots that are designated, is that true, or is that just for design looking, so to speak? In other words, if I counted every one of those, is that exactly how many parking spaces
If
we're
you
going to have?
counted everyone, you should come up with 37. This is based on the site plan that was put together in cooperation with the civil engineer. Yes, 37 parking spaces is what we determined early on. So we'll need to continue that conversation about the capacity of parking.
Okay.
I don't have anything
Anybody
else.
else? Anybody else? Good. Any other comments? If not, then let's go for a vote.
Before you do that, do you want to amend your motion to include addressing parking?
Yeah, we can do that. We haven't seen the site plan itself, so we don't know anything about parking yet, really. So, but yeah, I'm willing to amend it to include parking if there's some juggling that needs to be done.
Second.
Okay.
Mike Chase,
Yes.
David Schechter,
Yes.
Chris Reed,
Yes.
Lorraine Dodd,
Yes.
John Fergus,
Yes?
Steve Osborne.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you for that part of it.
Steve, if I may,
Certainly.
Kyle is the civil engineer, and if you want him to go over the parking, he can give you a little bit of an update of what it looks
Sure,
like.
that'd be good. We can do that, that way, since we're talking about the site part of it, if anybody's got any questions from that, if you don't mind.
Good afternoon, everybody. Kyle Chastina with Bowman Consulting. Eric's my boss. He wasn't able to make it today, so I'll be representing for our firm today. I guess in terms of the parking, do you have specific questions on it? I can't say that we have maximized the amount of parking, given the dimensions of the building and also what's been requested by Public Works and the fire station.
So you just said you haven't maximized the
We
parking?
have, I'm sorry,
Oh,
we
you
have
have
maximized,
maximized the parking?
At
So-
37.
Yes.
Now, how many staff parking places are needed? What's being used now?
Well, in the fire department, I've got 5 shift personnel.
You gotta get in the,
Or I guess another question would be, how much do you have right now?
How many
That's a fair
spaces?
question.
Alan, you know how many spaces we have at the moment? I don't. 50, I got 5, 9, probably 20 spaces, 15 to 20 spaces, because I have 5 staff person, 5 shift persons per day. I've got 2 staff vehicles that stay out front, 1 handicap spot, probably a half a dozen, 10 more. So we're probably looking at 15, 18 spots now.
Okay.
And then there's that turnaround time. In essence, we probably could manage it, but
You're
there would be
double
that
shifting,
turnaround
too.
time when I've got a shift. One shift's coming in, one shift hasn't left yet. I got that little window of time. Plus, we have a staff assistant. So on any given moment, I will have consumed 8 to 10 spots, any given time during the day.
Or night?
Or night, yep.
24/7?
Yes.
Pretty much?
Yes. And then I don't know what Alan needs for his
Yeah,
side.
what about Public Works?
So you're saying you need a maximum of 10 at a time, at any given time?
At least 10 at any given time, at least 10.
You have 5 firefighters
So
per
you
shift?
need 10
That's
Well, what-
10 right there.
firefighters, and then,
What if you have a training day?
And I'll fill up the spots. If I've got a day where I've got to bring in the whole department, I need 15 spots plus an admin assistant. Jeff and I will take a spot up front occasionally, but we can go somewhere else around with the vehicle with the additional bays. If we bring everybody in the department, we've got 15 people. If I've got an open house, I could need more spots. I mean.
Well, I was going there later, but we were starting with you guys.
Right. And then whatever Alan needs.
I'm very needy.
Yes, we know.
You're not being honest. Well, we have 20 employees. And then we have all of our equipment that is not going to fit inside. Dump trucks, the pickup trucks that we have. So I'm going to say that we're going to eat up easily 25 to 28 spots.
Where do they park now? How many parking spots are there with PD?
In the parking lot we share with the police department, and they don't park in our spots. They have their own, and then they park on the other side. So we have, I'm going to say.
15 somewhat?
20, about 20 spots right now. 18 to 20.
Okay.
So what is your total? What do you need total?
30 at least.
Now, would the vac truck be inside?
Well, that's the hope, that it needs to be inside. So I think
Backhoe?
The backhoe would stay where it's at, down at the, until if there was a place for it that we could fit it up. The new site, fine, but it's fine where it is down at the grandstands.
Till you have a flooding event?
Well, and then if we anticipate a flooding event, then we just move it up to where we're at. That's not a problem.
Or it sits outside?
Then we'll have to sit outside. Yeah.
So let me recommend that Kyle and Eric come back to our next meeting
you
where we're going to
speak up,
discuss
please?
colors and we can do the parking layout. Because there's some set-aside space for the fuel tanks, for other things that we've been discussing, that we may be able to tighten up and get the spaces. And then don't forget, we still have the site on Cinnamon available if we need to make that more of a storage yard for the larger equipment, gated. So, there's things that we can work out, so.
And I would agree, because the other hand of this is, if the lot is only so big, and you got so much of a building on it, you're going to come down to a choice. You make the building smaller so you can create more parking.
Or you make a parking garage, which I'm not suggesting, but that becomes
Well, yeah,
prohibitive.
2 levels of parking, so, and again, that comes at a cost.
And
So-
as the committee knows too, we're working with Publix, they're doing some design work over there so that when we have those larger events, we may be able to do off-site parking, and also with the school, so we're working with them on some improvements, on Jackson. So there's opportunities if we have these larger events, the Christmas event where we invite the public to make sure that they have a place to park.
Tiny question. I know you all probably discussed it before, but the handicap spots where you're going to have the handicapped parking areas, is there a reason why we didn't put 2 handicap spots closer to the front door?
The bays are there.
The bays are over on that one side. Just wondering, is there a reason why, I'm only asking, is there a reason why we have the handicap spots separated like that?
The purpose of that was to, in the event that there is an emergency, we were speaking on that earlier, somebody goes to the fire station, we want to provide a handicap accessible spot to that side of the building.
Okay.
And we did have a little bit of discussion about that. If someone came in for emergency / non-emergency to the fire station, as they do now, we want someone somewhere close for them to get close to the fire station.
Okay.
To get right in there.
All right, and this meets our parameters, or what we need, 2 spots per 37 is fine? 2,
Yes.
yep, okay, cool.
Yes.
I think the parking issue is extremely important in that it doesn't make any sense to put all of this money into a new facility knowing that right out the gate, there's an issue. And so I think that the parking issue needs to be taken very seriously, and it needs to be addressed concretely. Sort of like.
Do you mean that literally?
Yes.
Actually, when I look at the lower left aerial presentation, I noticed that in the back side of the building, you got some areas that probably are supposed to be landscaped. And maybe that could be sacrificed. If it wasn't paved, it might be stabilized, and then you could probably, right there, probably gain 5 or half a dozen spaces or something. So,
Okay,
again,
we've already passed the motion, we've given them a chance to look at it and get back, let's move on.
And I agree. I mean, we know the parking was the exception, so he has the to-do to come back with more ideas on the parking and the HVAC type items that were part of that.
Cool. But may I jump on the wagon with John real quick? I'm all about making permeable parking. I mean, I'd rather have less concrete and more permeable parking. So if there's a spot where we can move some parking spots in the grass or in some rock lot.
Which I think that's what he said. They'll take a look at that and come back with some more parking. We good? Anybody else?
I'm good.
All right. Let's move on to agenda number.
Are you going to vote on it?
We did vote on it.
Oh, yeah.
That was my point.
I didn't hear it.
We did vote on it. Let's move on to item number 5, which was the control options. Chief, talking about getting in and out and road and that stuff.
I think he's kind of going to stay with you. I'm going to leave. It's just 2 seconds. No, you said.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of this of what we brought up last time is on Jackson, as many of us know, since that's where we're putting the fire station, there are times when the school is letting in, letting out, and you get lines of traffic out there. And obviously, we want to make sure that the responding vehicles can get out of the fire station and out on to Jackson. So that was something we wanted to make sure that that part was being addressed, whether it was lights, lines, or whatever. Last thing we wanted to obviously have the fire department in there and then need to respond, and there's nothing but a whole row of traffic out there in front of Jackson, they can't get out. So I believe this is what we're trying to talk about and address.
Yes. Now, the only concern that I have is that based upon the architectural design with that driveway coming out, that area, and I think it doesn't have to be necessarily a formal traffic study. I think we just need to be out there to see what traffic does during school zones during different times. School buses are involved, the higher the traffic, rain events where people are picking up their kids. We need to see what that looks like.
And ball games.
And I don't know if ball games will impact us that far up Jackson, quite possibly, and that would be another one we probably would look at, just to make sure we've covered all the bases. What I do see is what I am concerned with, and I reached out, if anybody's noticed the city of Melbourne. Melbourne's got a fire station on O'Galley. In front of their station, they have a big square fence, which is one of the recommendations, option C you have here. I sent an email to the fire chief of Melbourne yesterday, and he responded back that...
That people ignore it.
Yes. In other words, I asked him how effective it was. It seems to be that people should not stop due to the train or long light. How effective this is for keeping a clear access path for responding units. His response was not very effective. It seems to work better in the downtown O'Galley area for the intersection than it does for him in front of a fire station. He's tried to get flashing lights or some other type of device to keep traffic from stopping, but FDOT would not approve. And that's going to be our battle. Our battle is going to be dealing with FDOT.
Well, that's one question I had. This is not a DOT road.
And that would have been my next, that's right where it's going next, is that maybe FDOT has no jurisdiction.
This is a city street.
Well, then it's just a matter of what the city and the committee and
Wait, Alan's got his hand up, so he may have some information on that.
Jackson is on the federal highway feeder system. So basically, it is controlled by FDOT and the Federal Highway Administration.
Okay, but
So I don't know what that means. I don't know if they fall under the jurisdiction as far as signage and things like that. We could easily find out, but I just did want you to know that it is on the federal highway feeder system.
okay.
So,
Because I know in traveling through Florida, I've seen in lots of places where you have, usually, it's the small volunteer fire department, like up there where the power plants are. And they'll have a light hanging out that says emergency stoplight or something like that, or fire. They've got a special sign with the idea, and this is on Route 1.
well, I can guarantee you, if it's on Route 1, if it's on a state highway, it has to be approved by DOT.
That's right. And you've got that, plus you've got the business with, putting the striping and everything, and I'd make it as obvious as one could. And then,
I would suggest that a galley might be a unique situation where we have double lane traffic going in a single direction. And as soon as you stop, because you should be stopping, the guy next to you is going to go past you and in front of you. So you have that competitive, unfortunate thing that happens on a galley. You won't have that occurring on this road.
yeah.
Well, and I think the ultimate, the intent was, we wanted to make sure that part gets addressed. I agree that it may have to come through the state. Obviously, Patrick Air Force Base does it on A1A. They have a light up there for A1A whenever that fire truck needs to leave Patrick and come out onto the main road. There's one on A1A in Cape Canaveral for the fire department up there. When they come out of their side street and have to come onto A1A, there is a light that activates just when the fire department comes out. Whether it's a light or not, I think the question is, the statement is, we want to make sure it's addressed. I can tell you, twice last week, I came out of Walgreens during school pickup time, and I sat in the driveway while cars were dead stopped in front of the driveway on Jackson, and I had to wait till someone was either nice enough to open up and let me out, or until traffic actually cleared. And at one point, traffic waiting to go on A1A was backed up all the way down to that driveway. So that does happen. That's kind of the point why I made that, is I didn't want to make sure that, you're right, if it's a rainy day and all the people are there to pick up their kids at Delore and stuff, that traffic's going to be dead stopped up there on Jackson. And if the fire department needs to get out, somehow you got to notify people, please stop and let us out now.
So we know the risk exists. I think the recommendation was somebody needs to sit out there and understand how much risk we actually have.
And what's legally allowed to do, whether the city can make that decision, whether, again, because there's schools there, whether the county may have input, or whether the state has input. I think the risk is there. We know there's an issue there.
And if it turns out there's an issue with DOT, I think our administration has had a little bit of success on A1A in getting pedestrian crosswalks and stuff. It's just a matter of making a bunch of visits and being very persuasive.
Just an idea. You know how in front of Delora, right off the side of the road, right in front of Delora, we have those sidewalk areas where, I don't know what it is. Is it a sidewalk or what it is? Do you know what I'm talking about? I am thinking, and I'm wondering if we have a traffic jam there, it would be good to have a spot where those cars can move to, so they're out of the way. Maybe it's not necessarily a parking area, but it's kind of a little road where or a side skirt of the road where they can move over and get out of the way. So if the fire department needs to come out, maybe they can send a guy out there and be like, hey, move here, and we can just squeeze that way. It might solve the problem if the lines on the road are never going to work.
Which I think is something, Liz, when we talk about the whole streetscape thing going on, I know we have some blueprints talking about where that's going to happen and what's going to be in that way. again, I think the ultimate thing is we just wanted to make sure that that got addressed, that the fire department was going to be able to get out. We know there's an issue there. We know there's a problem. We know that traffic gets backed up on that spot, as it does sometimes on Cinnamon when the light is red and all the cars are sitting in front of the station now. So I think the point going forward was we wanted to make sure we address that and that gets talked about, so we don't have the same issue that you would have on Cinnamon and
Well, we
South
have control
Patrick.
over the traffic right now at Cinnamon. So when we get an incident now, we hit a button, it turns the southbound traffic green, it turns a green arrow to the left, and it stops northbound traffic. So that clears that area for us. And there was a lot of discussion, going back in time when we built that station, got that light installed, there was a lot of discussion about the best way to do that. And, you know, the best way was to just move cars. Right. Just green them out and let them go.
But that can't happen if they're backed up all the way to A1A trying to get to the school or something, so you need that. Now, that may be a thing just like the police here at the start of the school year. They're real hard on the people that don't stop or go too fast or whatever. And it may be at the start of the year, they need to hammer people that didn't
Or to keep it clear.
participate, you know, in the don't block. So
Chief,
it's an operational thing.
do you think that philosophy needs to go forward to the signalized intersection of A1A?
Yes. I think if we can make that happen, yes, because then.
So you want to flush cars out?
Right, because now, you know, we've been talking about westbound traffic, now let's talk about eastbound traffic, which you explained. Now everybody's sitting and waiting, we could get caught up right there and never move. We might end up having to just get off of Jackson and get down to Roosevelt to go north on A1A, which is not conducive to an efficient response. So the idea would be is that if we had the ability to take over that light, absolutely. We could take it over for X amount of minutes until the trucks get out and get down the road.
So how do we,
DOT. Right. And from everything that I've understood, I mean, yes, we've had great success with our relationships, getting crosswalks and stuff. And I also hear that just sometimes, and Alan maybe ought to be able to validate this, sometimes they're just difficult to work with.
Well, I think the case, the way I've interpreted what's happened is, yes, they're recalcitrant, but if you keep pressing hard enough, and especially if you can say, well, we had a death here or something like that, you know, in other words, if they don't do it and you start to have problems, and you go back and you hammer them again, and you just keep at it till it happens. It took 20 years to get sand on the beach, got 20 years to get you a light over there, so.
So there wasn't any directive or motion or anything that we needed from this. It was just an information point that was put on there to kind of address that we brought this up at the last meeting. Does anybody else have any?
One small question. So I see on the drawing, we have a back entrance. We're going to be coming back in through Publix, essentially. Is that the way we're going to enter the fire department?
I think the traffic flow,
I mean, when we come.
It's off, I think it's off of that school road in.
But
The way that the site plan's laid out is trucks can enter from Jackson, go around the building and enter the rear of the fire department side.
Okay, but we can't cross the line and go through the parking lot at Publix and then out that way?
That part's being worked. That was the other part. Liz had brought up that we're working with them because they are also making some changes at Publix and around that area. So that was a consideration that maybe we might be able to come around the back side of Publix and into the fire department also.
Okay.
Just have to see where that goes.
Just an orientation question. On the middle, right here, how close is that to Jackson? It's kind of sitting there, and I can't see anything else. I can't figure out how close those things are.
there's no reference to Jackson Avenue.
Well, this is the south side of it, which I assume faces Jackson.
Roughly 50 feet to the face of the building, I'd say.
Okay, and that's
50 to 60 feet.
That's west of the dental place now, right?
Correct.
So really, in the picture, the middle picture, the aerial from the southeast, the Jackson would be in the blank area just below what looks like green area.
sorry, I missed your
right
question.
in there.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Is this area supposed to be Jackson Avenue then? In other words, you've got driveway, you have two driveways in, it looks like,
Yes, that's Jackson Ave there.
okay. Okay, that gives us a sense of scale then, I guess,
Right.
as to,
Several years ago, when the CRA was working on trying to do things in that area, I had hoped that we'd get somebody in who was a DOT type expert who would take a look at that whole situation with the schools and everything, but we never got anybody to do that for us. So this is as close as we're forcing the issue now, of taking a look at how all that traffic goes through and who owns what, and how we're playing that. So I think we need to be sensitive to that. That's a very difficult corner, but that's one of the things, if we're going to accept the fact we're going there, then we have to solve that problem as best we can. We had a lot of discussion about where it is now with the elementary school right here. I finally had to say, look, we're choosing to put the fire station here. These people, they have kids. They're going to be careful. They're not going to run over anybody with a truck.
Correct.
It's not going to happen. So we have to get the best design we can, be as safe as we can to do it, recognizing there's some risk.
Anywhere.
And there's risk moving moving it from here up to there. It's closer to the ocean. It's a choice we're making. We have to eat some stuff for that. I don't know what it is yet. Okay, thank you.
Any other further comments? I'll open it up for public comment.
I'm sorry, I have to,
better before than after the design.
Yeah, Dominic Montanaro, resident. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the parking issue. We're building this building, we're planning for this building. Let's look at how we're going to do it the best way. So when you look at coming out of the fire department, you're right, we need to control that light at A1A, because if we can expedite the traffic through that light, they can get out. If they have to go west, they can go down to Lee, and they can hang a right and go west on Lee. They don't have to go down Jackson to get to the west. So you've got, as long as you can get out of the front of the building, and we can control that by the light at Jackson, then we're on the right track. So, let's look at all of these things. And I think from the conceptual drawings, even though these are just conceptual, I would look at that and want to know, what's the distance to Jackson? I want to know the numbers that we're looking at here and what the distances are. I mean, you can't tell by these drawings, and it does give you a little bit more insight into looking at it when you know how many feet off the road you are, when the truck's coming out, when other vehicles can see it, and when it's visible. So I think when we come back, we're looking for these things in the plan, so that these people can make intelligent decisions.
Thank you.
And to his point relating to going west, it won't be our practice to go west on Jackson Avenue during school zone, because I'm going to be going through a 15-mile-per-hour school zone, and our policy now is that we do 15 miles per hour in a school zone, regardless of the response. So it'll be, even though we will be catching 3 more stop signs to go to Lee Avenue, it will be a better response than going through the school zone.
I would agree.
You're doing that today when you get on Cassia at 3
today.
o'clock.
If they have a response that they normally would go into the south end of the city, say up on A1A, then they are instructed that they're to go to Cinnamon and go up that way, or go south on South Patrick to make the best access they can. But our intention is to avoid school zones whenever we can.
I agree. Any other comments on that agenda item? If not, let's move on to item number 6, which is going to talk about the landscape plan, landscape architecture.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Susan Hall, and Kyle asked me today, and Dan, if I would attend today's committee meeting and answer any questions that you might have. We did put together packet for you, I think, for the last meeting that showed some native plant materials that we felt would be good options, and I see what John has put together here with this Fergus, and there's some good suggestions in there too. So I guess I'm here to hear what the feedback that you'd like to give me and any direction that you all have before we get started.
Anybody have any questions or opening comments they want to make about?
I think I'd like to make a couple of general comments, which are reflected in things I wrote. My, not necessarily number one, number two, but I'd say my 1 and 2, both of them 1.5. Keep Public Works workload to an absolute minimum. Every time we add plants, landscaping, they have more work to do. And so that was one thing that I kept in the top of my head. And the other was, again, the issue about especially egress for the fire department during or after a storm. And with those in mind, I had some others about using natives. Since this is a new city facility, we keep preaching natives and xeriscaping. We better practice it too. So with those in mind, one principle I came up with is no large trees.
I noticed that.
That's gumbo limbo, that's live oak, magnolias, there's a long list of big trees. But instead of just complaining about big trees, I figured I needed to provide some alternatives. And sand live oak, they may get to be 30 feet tall. I've got a couple in the south side of our yard that if I hadn't topped them out would probably be at 20, 25 feet, but the trunks are only this big. You know, they don't get huge in diameter, which means that if they came down, probably 3 strong guys from Public Works would drag them out of the way. A live oak comes down, you're going to need a big chainsaw and you're going to need a backhoe to move it. And so my thought was that there's sand live oak, there's Chapman oak. They're both growing up on Hightower Beach Park. They're pruned as shrubs because of the salt air, but they're both there. And they did okay on the south side of our house to the point that I had to keep trimming them away from the eaves. And then there's some other plants, but that was kind of the starting point. And then as you see, as you go through the list, there were other things that I was concerned about.
Do you have any, what your thoughts are on lawn versus ground cover?
That's one that actually my wife and I have been wrestling with.
We wrestle with it all the time.
Yeah, and
Can you speak louder, please?
Yeah, we wrestle with that all the time.
And the best solution that I can give you at this point, in fact, is the top of this list, Strigolosa mimosa. For what it's worth, I planted 3 plants 10, 15 years ago on the vacant lot that's southeast corner of Temple and Cassia. And within a couple years, it had covered a couple acre lot. It spreads very nicely. It's not a trip hazard, you know, it doesn't get tall and stuff. They mow it, but there have been periods when they haven't mowed it, and you know, but it only, the little puffball gets about this high and that's it. It's not something that just keeps, you know, building up. And supposedly it'll stand foot traffic. And so that seemed to me to be an alternative. We have tried various grasses and we haven't been happy with any of them. We've got one we're playing with now, but I don't even know what it is. But we got some, it was given to us, and it grows that high and it stops very fine, very dense, but it only gets that high and it stops, and it just sits there, kind of mounds up. I don't know whether it could be zoysia kind of does the same thing. We've
Zoysia
played with
does,
that.
and there's paspalum too, which is considered, paspalum, which is considered a native, but I think that's actually a pretty high maintenance grass, in my opinion, the
Yeah,
paspalum.
yeah. Well, we know somebody that tried to start it in their yard, I think twice, and
Yeah.
just couldn't do it. And actually, I know somebody else that got it started, but then it died. So it is a maintenance problem. Cross that off for Public Works. Plus, it's nice to have grass, something you don't have to mow. And that's one reason I keep going back to Strigolosa. I become enamored of it, let's put it that way. But then there's another one that wouldn't take foot traffic, but that we had, and I don't think I had a write-up on it, is Ambrosia hispida.
I saw that in their packet, and I have not worked with that one, but another consideration is availability. And I
Yeah.
saw where they gave a link to an available nursery, but one of the things that we always look at hand in hand with our plant palette is the availability of those materials.
Yeah,
So-
and I only found, and I didn't know it was available until there was a little nursery down in Florida, on a beach, that we found it. But it's one of those things, though, that you don't need a whole lot of it to get, in other words, get it started, and it'll spread. And the same thing with Strigolosa. Like I said, we covered a whole vacant lot.
It will. It's an aggressive grower, which is a good thing. The University of Florida looked at it years ago as a lawn replacement. And they
Okay.
also looked at perennial peanut, which we've had good success with west of the intercoastal, but on beachside, not so much.
Yeah, I
think
don't
it's more
think
of
it
a
likes the salt
issue.
very much, yeah.
And the sunshine mimosa is only moderately salt tolerant too, but I have seen it do well out on the beach.
Yeah, well, I think the stand that we put in, I think is probably about the same distance from
The ocean.
the ocean, and there isn't a whole lot between it and the ocean, so it's not very well protected. So I think and I'm not sure how much landscape. That's one of the things, we don't have a landscape layout, so we can't see where the taller things or the lower things would be. But
We'll be working on that as the site plan firms up.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, obviously, we just need to make sure, I know the city has ordinances and rules for how many trees you gotta have.
That's right.
Say
Yeah.
this, because a lot says you will have trees, and palm trees don't count as trees.
No, oh, they do, but it's how many?
25% or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to that point.
Well-
So obviously, you're right to the point, we need to make sure we follow all our own ordinances.
That's right.
That go in there
Yeah.
with that also. So if there is a requirement for so many trees, we need to make sure we have trees, make best choices in trees, but that they qualify, as well as going with natives and doing that. And I agree, we want less maintenance, even to the point, we don't want to mow, but we don't want trees that are dropping limbs and palm fronds and a whole bunch of other stuff for Alan's guys to be out there picking up also. We say low maintenance, we really want it to be sustainable to the point it doesn't do anything, right? Sits there and looks pretty, it's functional.
I
We don't
wish
really
I
need
could
it.
promise that, but. I
Yeah, there's
can't.
there's nothing that does nothing. but,
Unless it was not real.
But, I mean, we want to do that to, say, I was going to say, we want to do that to as close a point as possible.
Yes, understood.
From that point of view.
Yeah.
When we were
Oh, go ahead.
When we were discussing the sustainability aspect of the building, we talked about a well. Watering these plants, is that an aspect that we need to consider?
Yeah. I was-
Only to establish them. After that, I would say our philosophy at home has been, if it doesn't survive on its own after it's been babied, it doesn't belong there.
But let's talk about that period where it is babied. We've run numbers both ways, whether it's hand watering or whether a system is put on drip irrigation, which is sustainable and low volume, and available to you at time of drought. But
And we have found in most cases that putting in a drip system is more economical than paying a contractor to come in and water.
Mhm.
Is that the approach that you all would like to look at? We can run the numbers both ways.
I'm inclined to use the drip to get them established, and if it comes that we get like, and we had in 98 when we had a really bad drought, you know, that
Because
it's
you really-
there.
You don't want to lose your landscape,
Yeah.
if you can prevent that, yeah.
I think that goes back to, that may be a case in point to make for a well at some point for irrigation. Because obviously there'll be an expense if you try to hook that up to city water and use that as a drip system, and that would not be, that's not sustainable and that's not preferred, obviously.
So those are the questions that we're going to want to use that will tolerate our type of well water.
Yeah. And I would suggest artesian well water. And in fact, this kind of relates back to the interior design. Is there any reason not to make it so if water were lost, which has been known to happen out here during hurricanes, when everybody's occupying the building, that you couldn't basically run an interior gray water system so that you could at least flush toilets and maybe shower using, in other words, you shut off the city water valve, you open up the well valve, and you use well water instead of...
I think that's a possibility that you can discuss when they get to the interior part as we go. Again, trying to keep in scope and what the decisions are that we were tasked to make here. I would also advise that city staff is also working with them, talking about these are things we want inside the firehouse. That's really outside of our scope of what we're talking about here. Again, trying to keep in, yes, sustainability. We are talking about lagoon-friendly landscaping to that point. Again, architectural design and access. So I just want to make sure we're staying within those confines of what we're trying to discuss and not get into all the details inside. Because again, we are really only talking about a conceptual design at this point. We're not really talking about, as I said, colors and materials and all those details yet. Chris?
One small detail, if you don't mind. But when you're looking up irrigation systems, can you look up smart irrigation systems?
That's what we use.
Okay.
We
So,
have,
that
with,
makes me happy.
we do with the water monitors and the flow meters and many of the stations these days come with a small weather station attached to them. So they're more sophisticated than the rain sensors that most of us have on our homes.
Okay. That's my only concern.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I don't know whether it's still operating or not, but the fire department had a pretty good weather station that they logged the data in, at least for years. So they had that information. I would assume that would be incorporated. I mean, it's not that expensive, incorporated into this building anyway, so they'd have a real weather station.
Yeah, otherwise, some of these controllers will, through Bluetooth, will hook on or attach to a nearby weather station, something within a certain half-mile radius or quarter-mile radius, something like that.
Well, how do you want to go through species by species or general? I've made a lot of general comments.
Can I recommend we don't get too deep into it till we figure out what the site plan looks like?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just as a
And one thing go ahead. I think that we also need to keep as one of our prime considerations, low maintenance.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Low water requirements and low maintenance.
Low maintenance and like, what if we have a different landscaper come through? The only problem I have with mimosas is if you keep cutting them down with a lawnmower, they don't stay looking nice. You have to really know how to treat them and get them to bush for a while before they start looking pretty. I'd be concerned about picking plants that 1 week we chop them down with a lawnmower and they look absolutely terrible.
The benefit we have is the lawnmower guy's boss is sitting right there.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not always that simple. I mean, it takes a
Well, yes, I'm assuming if Alan, given his way, he'd be just happy with, chips out there and nothing growing out there that he has to do for that.
I've seen,
And that.
we had a project where at the end of each intersection, we had a little green area. And I honestly don't feel like the maintenance was consistent on those areas. And if we don't have plants that are obvious, where it's obvious how you maintain them, we're going to end up with.
Well, and I think that's part of the point everybody's making here is you really need to have plan it and forget it type planning. It needs to go in and really require nothing from that point forward that still looks nice, that's sustainable, but we don't have to send somebody to spend man-hours taking care of it, because that is the problem we have now. We don't have enough manpower now to take care of the fields and grass and areas that we have, which leads to exactly what you said. The problem is we have some of those nice areas, but we don't have the time and the manpower to go take care of the existing part or medians that DOT wants us to take care of and all those other items. So yes, we always want it to look nice, but again, it needs to be something that is really plan it and forget it and try to move away from it as best you can. I granted, in a perfect world, we'd be like California and we'd have AstroTurf and Alan would be forever happy because it would just be that carpet out there that's permeable and you never have to worry about it. But that's not what we're trying to go for here at that point. So we need to stay there, but I would tend to agree with you, Mike. I think we should leave it open enough. Obviously, we need site plan to come back. I think the idea was, she was telling us, here's some of the ideas, what we're looking for. What I think we really would need is bring that site plan back, which I used to sit on the beautification committee, and I've seen it. They'd say, here's the map, here's what we're planting where. This is what goes here, this is what we recommend here. And then we can look at it and say, we agree, we don't agree, we wish it was something else. But I think at this point, we're just throwing stuff out there and we're not putting anything down in concrete.
And we're also going to need a list of requirements from the city, right?
Right.
So we need to make sure we have that also.
Right, and I would agree that, again, we got to make sure we stay within the city ordinances and show me what we have to offer. We could go from there.
And hopefully those suggestions would reflect the lowest maintenance plants and the lowest irrigation plants.
Yeah, we can make some good decisions as a committee and as a group, and I think that we would want to vet the plant material list very carefully before we start to distribute the design across the site. One thing I want to add, well, as we know, there's no such thing as no maintenance. There just isn't. But more than that, the first year, as things are establishing, historically, there has always got to be somebody on the lookout for weed control. Now, there are things, because they always want to pop up right after the soil's been disturbed or there's been a lot of planting. So there are some things we can do, like the use of a pre-emergent, if that's desired, or I don't personally believe in ground cloth, but that's just me. But that is, we have to be realistic about our expectations, and that is something that we need to be aware of will happen.
Now,
So we need to be ready for it.
Yeah, a couple thing on that first year. Number one, I would agree, no ground cloth.
Yeah.
We've got a case where no ground cloth. It's put in to keep the weeds from coming up. The trouble is, they will come up, they'll come through the cloth, or their roots will go through it, and then they are a bear to get out. Plus, when one of the plants dies that's been put into a little hole in that cloth, you can't dig it out because you can't cut the cloth with a shovel. It's just maybe use mulch instead, and that's another thing.
We can increase the depth of our mulch, keep it away from the bases of the plants. I mean, there are things that we can do. And we can also look at using some decorative stone if there are areas that would be helpful. Though, and not all decorative stone requires a cloth beneath it either. So if it's angular, it lays down nicely without a cloth. So there are different things we can take a look at.
And actually, you know, working with Public Works folks, if you can, you might want to drag in Dominic, since he's been playing with native plants for a long time.
Waiting for public comment.
But the idea being that it doesn't have to be a purely green lawn. In fact, you like a little bit of variety in your landscape, but it doesn't have to all be plants either. There's some nice-looking lawns that are either rock, I've seen like wood chip mulch, crushed coquina. There's a bunch of different things, and you might want to mix them up a little bit. This is an opportunity to almost make a showcase where the city residents could come and say, oh, well, that's what that kind of lawn looks like. You know, people look at our place and they say it looks like a jungle, but, you know, that's just the way it is. But there's a lot of things you could do that could inform the residents also, and the businesses. You want public comment?
I will. Everybody's done up here.
I'm good.
Good. Open it for public comment. Please, come to the podium.
Ronnie Fergus, resident. I've been dealing with plants a long time, and this is a real good opportunity to minimize, find out what your requirements are. I've seen things come and go in the city that have produced major work for public employees, especially Luba, if any of you know Luba. She is a prize. She retired, she's back, and you can tell the difference. Because anytime you make a planting area and you have plants here, plants there, and plants there, you're going to have weeds. So I don't know if Alan would agree, grass you can mow. They've taken out some of those areas on Cassia where they had plantings around the trees. Some of them they've left, but they've taken them out. And grass looks a whole lot better mowed than garden beds with weeds in them. And if you're going to have garden beds, I highly suggest using the free corrugated cardboard that's available behind the Schechter Center. When they did the library, group did the library 2 years ago. This is its second summer that it's gone through. The areas where we use cardboard, we have minimum weeding. I've used it over at church on the whole west side, minimum weeding. And I just had a thought when I came up here. When they redid that church back in 2007, they didn't talk to me about their landscaping, and I asked them. And so they took the driveway and they did all this beautiful landscaping in front of the church, not regarding the fact that there was torpedo grass. So next time you go back, see what torpedo grass does, and you can't just eradicate that. You have to dig that out. I'm not sure what we're going to look, as John said about getting plants out. We want to take out all those plants so we can deal with the torpedo grass. So if you've got torpedo grass there, I don't know what you're going to do to keep it out of your garden beds. So I say minimize, because you can mow torpedo grass. And so I highly suggest some of the things that are required, and make the building, the facility itself, the accent of your plantings, not something out here by the road, but that kind of, you have to see the site plan where you need plantings, and that would highlight the building itself and not be something that you want to look at when you're riding down the road. But, oh, you're supposed to be watching the road, number one. I notice things like that, but just please consider that. Dominic knows plants, I know plants, you know plants, John knows plants. And get your site plan, see where you want to put them and what you want it to look like. And as Lorraine said, minimize your watering, minimize torpedo grass or dollarweed or something else, which is if that grows into any of your plannings, it's not going to look nice, or it's going to, you're going to have to spray for it, somebody's going to have to dig it out. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Dominic Montanaro. We have what's called the land development regulations and codes that are in our ordinances, and there are a list of plants that are in the LDRs that basically address, what the city is looking at. And I'm looking at both of these lists of plants that, have been provided here. And there's some that are just, until you see the amount of space that we're going to be planting in, it's hard to really look at some of these because, you could look at saw palmetto and look at what they look like at DeSoto and Verbinia. They're huge. So if you don't have a big space to put saw palmettos in, don't put them in. For those of you who are familiar with the old post office property, there's that hedge that goes across the front. So when that property was planned out, I was on the Planning and Zoning Board. There are sand live oaks in that hedge, but they've been cut as part of the hedge for 20 some odd years. So I guarantee you, if you go there and you look into that hedge, you're going to see trunks that are this big because they're the sand live oaks that have been growing there for 20 some odd years. So when you plant sand live oaks, you do them in a cluster. You want to do 2 or 3 or 4 of them in little areas depending on where you're planting. I agree with John, we want to stay away from big stuff, but you do have to have trees. The sand live oaks are an option. You don't want to plant big ones because little ones grow better than big ones. If you're going to do irrigation, which I suggest you do, I suggest you put in either 1.5 or 2-inch pipe going from the pump out to wherever your beds are so that you don't ever have to dig them up because they're Schedule 40 pipe. They're going to be under concrete or they're going to be under whatever your driveways are. Most of where you're looking at planting up there now is under pavement, so I don't think you're going to run into weeds right off the bat like torpedo grass because it probably doesn't grow there now because it's under concrete. So there isn't any of that you have to deal with, but you will deal with weeds, you're right. I don't believe in ground cloth either. So until we actually see the green space that we're looking at planting in, it's hard to look at all of these plants. But I will tell you that there are certain things on here that you want to stay away from. Big trees, the gumbo limbo, they get white flies. White flies have killed gumbo limbos across the state. There's different things on here that I look at that would be very applicable to what we're looking at doing on this property. The mimosa I love. I planted 4 or 5 plants on the south side of DeSoto Parkway between Rosada and Verbinia, and that whole stretch is mimosa now. So that was 20 some odd years ago when those got planted. The Spartina, the muley grasses, those are all great plants that you can use in conjunction with the mimosa because they'll grow with it. But until you see the green spaces that you're looking at, it's hard to pick these plants.
Thank you. Any other comment? Bring it back to the board. Anything else on landscaping? I think we agree. I think the point that's been well made is really until you see a site plan.
So can I make a
Sure.
little wrap up? So, the first meeting, we got a good chance of meeting, the W&J team and what they're each contributing towards this project. We didn't talk about stormwater. We haven't talked about drainage. And that's what Eric and Kyle are designing right now. That's why you don't have a site plan, because we didn't know the size of the building because we were still meeting with staff to decide what the interior space was going to look like. And the landscaping, of course, once we get the design, we just wanted to give you a blush of these are the plants, and get your feedback. So when Susan understands what the site plan looks like, she can at least give you a visual of what you just discussed.
Right.
In the plan. So our next meeting, I'm going to ask you guys, what's good for you, but for them to get the site plan, to get the drainage, to get the parking, building footprint, the landscaping. I was told October 22nd might work for W&J, to give you that now full visual of what we've been discussing. So, any questions, or does that work for you all?
That works for me. One suggestion I've got, because probably the first question I'd ask, is whatever you present to us, that staff has looked at, and they're all happy with it, or
Yeah,
at least
John,
not
staff
on.
has been part of this process from the very beginning, because it's their building, it's their space. You know, Fire Rescue has a committee of the users, of, you know, the personnel.
Yeah,
that have been given-
I'm talking about things even like the landscaping and
Oh,
all
no, they're
of that.
included. I mean, Alan said, don't make me have to maintain anything, so as far as.
Okay.
So I got his remarks, and the chief said, I'll do whatever you guys need. So landscaping's not big on, I mean, it's for us, for the community, because that's going to be our flagship, our public works and our fire station as you drive back down Jackson. And if we get this Complete Street grant, we're going to carry that all the way down from A1A to South Patrick. So, you know, this is just the start, and, you know, so the next meeting, you're going to pick out colors, we're going to have a site plan, we're going to have a landscape, you know, design for you all to pick apart and move things, and so that's when the rubber hits the road. And then we got to get this out to bid. We need to build, Alan, a new public works building. It's way overdue. So that's our goal, is to get you guys to commit and get them to work and get it out to bid and get under construction.
Well, does the consultant have all the information they need? Do they feel they have what they need to do what I guess we and staff are asking them to do?
Yeah, we've been giving them, we've been having meetings, you know, regular meetings with, you know, with drainage, interior, wall thickness, to do a pole or not to do a pole. I mean, you know, and then of course keeping it in within the budget, because that's real important too. So, and if they don't, they will reach out, and I can reach out to you all if we need to have an emergency meeting prior to the 22nd, you know, we'll do it.
How's our timeline looking? We're supposed to have 6 meetings, it's only meeting number 2, so
Well,
the 22nd is pretty far out.
So I think the recommendation was not to exceed 6, so if we can do it within 4 and get us, you know, getting it out to bid, even better.
Well, I would say the point, I mean, there's no sense in having a meeting for sake of having a meeting. I mean, we want each meeting to be substantial and have.
Wasn't what I was implying.
I did.
Just 4 weeks out doesn't seem like we're hitting our
That's kind of what I was just going to
target.
get at. If 22nd is the
And I mean, if we have to
soonest,
do 7, you know, that's fine
but
too,
if 22nd is what we're saying,
I think that gives them time to get all the comments, finish up with staff, let our landscape architect get to work. And then if things come through that I can share with you before the meeting, I will certainly do that as a committee, you know, so that you don't get it the same day. I don't like that. Yeah.
so let's start with that. Does the 22nd of October work for everybody? So another Tuesday,
3 o'clock?
3:30? Good? What work?
3:30.
3:30 would work best for me, but I think I'm over at Verde Eco School till 3:30, so I got up a little early, but I can get over here by 3:30.
Okay, I mean, I'm all right with 3:30.
I'm fine with 3:30.
Is that good with everybody?
I'm waiting for Ronnie you looking at the calendar? I suspect it's open.
So let's go with that, the 22nd, October 22nd at 3:30. We'll in here, and what we'll do, obviously, if somebody comes up with a conflict or whatever, get with Grace or Liz and let them know should we need to do that from that point of view. Before we do some last minute housekeeping up there, is there any other board discussion? Anybody else want to discuss anything else? No? So then the next agenda item is the approval of the minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
A motion and a second. And a vote, Frank, please.
Okay, Mike Chase,
Yes.
Lorraine Dodd,
Yes.
Chris Reed,
Yes.
John Fergus,
Yes.
David Schechter,
Yes.
and Steve Osborne.
Yes. Okay. Motion is approved. Obviously, if there's any other agenda items, again, Liz will keep us informed of what's coming up for the next meeting. If you think there's something you want to be put on the agenda, obviously contact Liz and let her know, as her grace, and say, hey, we'd like to discuss this. If there's nothing further, close the meeting.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
You're having fun with this, aren't you? There you go.
Love making things pretty.